Bam.
This is Brendan, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Oh, we did it. We did it. We got it done. Every time we get to meet someone new on the show, it's always exciting. It's funny, in your space on the internet and with the expertise that you've created and built over the years, you're wildly known and successful in your world. And same thing for me with podcasting, 1,500 episodes, all kinds of incredible people. But someone can walk across your line and be like, "Hey, this is the genius in this field. I had no idea this person existed." And so I've had a real good time watching all of your content. And I have this happen to me all the time where people are like, "What, you've just been right here all this time working your heart out." And so it's so funny that you can discover somebody who is completely established and available, but that's the modern world we live in.
Well thought of, Pete. I kind of feel that way about a lot of people. Where I
Yeah.
think in society, you usually only meet somebody after. I mean, I'm not in that category because I'm still not as talented as I'd like to be. But like, let's say like a LeBron James, where you wait for him to be really really successful, then everybody finds out about him, but they don't see the other 90%.
Yeah. Well, and let's not limit what you've done. Like you've definitely carved out a niche for what you do in a very crowded field, and it's powerful. I mean, if someone wants to get better at a variety of things within public speaking, like if nothing else, you're definitely one of the top dudes, if not the dude.
Oh, thanks, Pete. I appreciate it. One thing for sure that I'll give myself credit for. I'm definitely the youngest, so I have
Okay.
a lot. I have a lot of time ahead to be the number one guy. But yeah, I appreciate the kind words, man. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you do it? How do you look like right now, right? YouTube's algorithms, and I'm not bitching about YouTube, but I'm going to bitch about YouTube for a second here. YouTube has killed my long form content. They've just crushed it. They don't allow it to be discovered at all. And so you're trying to things like, okay, now I'm going to do shorts. And then some shorts I'll publish. And I know you must feel this. You're like, 2,000 views. That's not too bad for me. And then literally the next one in the queue, same topic, same guest, same, zero. What are we supposed to do, man? I know you're out there and you feel this pain, but you're like, if you guys would just step out, get your foot off the hose, my content, and then they'll tell you, hey, you found something good, it's working, and you're like, that's bullshit. It's all working if you just stop limiting it. But I don't know, is that unfair for me to say that?
I mean, I think you're pointing out a lot of great things. Here's the way I think of YouTube. YouTube's like the NBA of content creation. This is where all the best content creators in the world go to play because that's where the greatest reward is, but it's also where the greatest competition is, like the NBA
Mm,
or any other sports draft. So
sure, sure.
for me, the way that I won on YouTube, which is I would say unique to me, is I didn't rely on the algorithm to get the count that I have, Pete. I hustled one person at a time. I remember when I
Okay.
started the YouTube channel, my philosophy, and it was crazy at the time, and I kind of done that, is I don't care if I had to guest on 10,000 podcasts. Because
Yeah.
even if I guested on 10,000, let's say nobody else was listening to this, it was just me and you. At least I would make a new friend, and that new friend of mine would share my YouTube channel with 3 to 5 other people. And
Yeah.
that was my perspective from day one. Because yeah, I'm getting attacked on YouTube too for reach, but hey, you got to keep hustling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And look again, like I'm just pointing out some interesting stuff. They tell you, they encourage you, but you're like, that's banal. Like it's not real. You're encouraging me that I found some kind of new content stream that's going to be useful. But really, what would be useful is if they just got their foot off of my channel and let it stand up on its own merits. But I hear what you're saying. It's tough because what you do is really valuable, and you give people access to a skill that is terrifying for people. But I'll be damned if they let you get access to everybody. So you do have to 1% it. And then maybe that's part of the growth, right? Is like you just have to, I do the same thing. Like, hey, I picked up 2 followers today. Hey, I picked up 3 followers. Ooh, 10, 20, back to two. And so you do have to nickel and dime it. But I guess if you keep at it, you just keep growing, right?
Absolutely, Pete. My philosophy on YouTube when I started it is a strategy I teach called the 520 rule. So the 520 rule is really simple. Whenever somebody asks me how to succeed on YouTube, I always say, yeah, just post one quality piece of content, one really good one, well produced or well done, long form, once a week for the next 10 years. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where people get stuck. They go, 10
Yeah.
years? I go, yeah, if you're not willing to play for 10 years, you can't win on YouTube. It's not possible. That's why when I started creating on other platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn, I was like, oh, this is a joke. I can just literally post the same content that does
Right.
well every 2 months and nobody would even notice. But yeah,
Yeah.
YouTube's a different beast for sure.
I love when my friends are like, "Hey, are you still doing that, YouTube thing?" Or they'll say, "Hey, you're getting some really good guests," and I'm like, "Yeah, no, where you been?" Like, you know, every week over and over again. That's the other funny thing too is within your own circle, you don't want to always hype your own stuff, but if you don't, who else will?
Exactly. Will Smith says that all the time as well. Like the first person to believe in your content needs to be you, and your vision needs to be you. Because if you don't believe in you, you can't really enroll other people to believe in what you're doing.
Oh
And that's
man.
that's why I think I got traction really quickly.
That's so true. I love when and I'm helping somebody with a podcast. They're like desperate to tell me the name of the podcast and the concept, and I don't care about those things. You haven't even earned my attention. You have to go out and you have to work. You have to figure it out. And when they'll say something silly like, "I can't stand to hear my own voice." Well, then why do I want to hear it? And I don't mean that to be mean. I mean that to be illustrative. Like, if you haven't done the work to get past that simple fear, and this is going to go right into what you do, then you haven't earned my attention. And that's just like that is a dragon you have to slay. So I'm going to point it out. Like, here's this dragon. If you can't do it, I'm not gonna.
Well said, Pete. I mean, for me, Pete, it's all about realizing that the market is the market. Like in the same way, I shouldn't be a baker because if I was a baker, it would be horrible. It would go horribly wrong.
Yeah,
People might go to the hospital, things like that, right? So I should be cooking, right? That's just not
yeah,
my thing. In the same way, other people shouldn't be starting YouTube channels on effective communication, right? So it's all about realizing like what sport should I play, not just in content
right.
creation, but more importantly in life, where I think I can be successful at.
Yes,
Like even me, I don't even consider myself that great at media. Like my videos are always the same. It's always three things that I'm teaching. Yeah, sure, I look nice in a suit and my friend produces that nice, but there's not a lot of B-rolls. It's not as fancy as like a Mr. Beast video. But the competitive edge to the channel is because I'm the youngest in my space, I appeal to a younger generation, but I have the expertise of someone double my age. So somebody who's 20 will relate more to me. So that's like a niche audience that no one can
sure.
touch. And then the other piece is like communication, public speaking. Like nobody creates content on that, so it's
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to play in.
The one of the big things you're talking about here too is not what you want to do, but what are you willing to do? I'm working on. I'm going to do a little let's call it a TED talk on one of the podcast channels. Actually, I think maybe the one we met on, where like, hey, here's a conference, here are experts talking, and I'm trying to describe this very thing. Like, you're adorable with your concept of where you're going to be, but what are you going to do today? What are you going to do tomorrow? That 10-year path you're talking about. Are you going to send out the emails? Are you going to build a great email that is not just, it's not a pitch? Like when I send my email out to ask someone to be on the show, it's genuine. I'm like, hey, look, I love your work. Here's who's been on the show. Here's what I need from you. And a lot of that is boilerplate, but I write that email out each time, every single time, typos and all, because that's what I've learned works, right? But I have to do that work to understand what it takes to feed that one small part of my machine to make the show happen.
Well said, right? And for us, it's really the same idea, right? Except instead of having guests on, it's really saying, are we really thinking about the quality of the content, which goes into something that you might find interesting, which is what is the definition of value, right, Pete? So
Yeah,
Chris Doe says the definition of value is tell me something I don't already know. And
right.
this is a lot of mistakes that people make, not just as a podcast guest or as a way to add value. They just say the same thing everyone else is saying versus really pointing, I call this the golden nuggets list, really pointing out the insights that you
Yeah,
feel you have a knock on in your industry that nobody else is talking about. And that's really how you become a
it's
category
huge.
of one.
Yeah, no, that's huge. The A lot of the work we were doing is pushing a shopping cart through a grocery store and letting your brain play with concepts, and boop, it spits something out. And then you have to go, how do I use this? Right? Like, this isn't like I sat down for 2 minutes and I recorded something. No, 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 no. Like, there's actual depth. And if you do find that golden nugget, gold is malleable. Gold has a lot of value in it. So go back to that nugget and what else is in it. Like, you talk about whatever. Tell me something that I don't already know. Okay. And then I would say, oh, there's another facet to that. It can't be unbelievable. So you give someone something they've never heard before, and they're like, "What? That isn't true." So you have to figure out like how to deal with that barrier because that's going to be there. If you wacko them too hard, they're going to stay wackoed.
Absolutely. It's just about finding the balance. Like I think an easy way
Yeah,
of thinking about it is I like doing this as a podcast guest. You just listen to other people in your space who have similar topics to you, and you
yeah,
just write down a piece of paper as if you were the guest, not them. And as they're answering the host's questions, you just go, what are they missing in their logic? Like an
mm,
example with me, I mean, there's a plenty, but I'll give you one. Like a lot of my space is really fear based. Oh, the fear of communication is like closer to death. We're all going to die. And I was like, how would your life change if you're a great communicator? Like, let's change the
yeah,
energy around this. So that's an
yeah,
example of a golden nugget. But for somebody listening to this, it's a different insight for their industry.
yeah. When you develop the muscle to go on, and I speak, I'm not a big professional at, but I talk in front of people all the time, and you often will say something that is really just like it's not the when you craft the whole message, word for word, line by line, you're like, that's awesome. That's awesome. I know that's going to pay the bills. But sometimes the other day I wrote something and I send it out to my reading list, all my friends. I'm like, you guys got it. And they all enjoy my reading. And so they'll say something back. And then throughout the piece, they'll be like, oh, you know what? This really stuck with me. And it's different stuff I hadn't thought of. And it was not a throwaway line. It's still quality, but it wasn't the spot that I thought was the nugget. And then I'm like, okay, there's something else there. I need to break this 7-minute piece of writing or this talk into a smaller piece and spend more time on this one element of my talk or my writing or whatever it's going to be.
Absolutely. I love that strategy. The my version of it, which is similar, is called QIT, questions, insights, titles. So
Mhm.
one is just gather all of the questions that people are asking you about your space and just write them down. So one question I get a lot is, how do you present in a second language? And I was like, huh, that's a good question. And no one's really answered that one. So I'd write down the question. But then Pete, becomes insights. You block
Yeah,
an hour out of your life and you write like 1,000-word blog about how you would perfectly answer that question. And then T is just titles. How do you title the video, the piece of content in a way that attracts people who
yeah,
also have that same question? So it would be
yeah.
like how to present in a second language.
Another benefit from that negative of getting onto that stage is having that person walk up to you because you've touched them in a way that I call it there's affect over effect, right? And so the response to the stimuli you create was to get that person to get up out of their chair and come over and meet you. You've done it. You've created that magic moment. And if you're afraid to get up on the stage, if you're afraid to put the practice in to go and talk to someone, then you don't have the ability to do the very thing that you want to do with your work, which is impact people in this positive way.
Well said. I completely agree, right? It's the three parts of communication. The first part that we focus on too much is how do we get people to listen to our ideas? But that's only one part of the game, Pete. And you'd really touched
Yeah.
upon the second and third point, which is how do I get people to take action on my ideas? And how do I get people to share my ideas? So it's not enough to just speak. It's also important to your point for
Mm,
the affect effect to get them out of their seats and to say, like, I need to take action on this. Like Gary Vaynerchuk is like the textbook example of that. Sure, people might call him simple, but one thing that he's really good at he's forcing people to take action. The only reason I got TikTok was because of him, right? So there
yeah.
you go. So you just gotta push people into action.
When we look at education, we're focused on, STEM, and rightfully so. We need a lot of folks to be good at that, but not everybody is meant to be. It's just like when you were talking earlier about finding your game and what are you willing to do every day. I'm not willing to balance quadratic equations. I'm not. I don't enjoy it. I don't feel good at it, and it doesn't make sense to me, right? I'm not saying I'm dyscalculic, but I don't want to fish. I don't want to do math. All right, certain math, okay, maybe, but when you go through a basic and even a secondary education, boy, there's that push. Math, math, math. You have to deal with math at levels that are above what you need to do. So now you spend a lot of energy, and it just consumes who you are to get through math. But if you have to go do the public speaking level for your grade or for your degree, boy, they'll make every concession ever to include everybody in class leaves and you go up on stage and there's nobody to speak to in your public speaking class other than you and the professor, or everybody will turn their desks to accommodate this fear to knock down this wall. I don't know that that does us any justice. Like if you don't ever have to go on a stage and do a play, then you haven't learned the experience of that. And some of that is getting over yourself so that you can actually go do something special.
Absolutely, Pete. That's one piece. And then the other piece is an acknowledgement as to why we even fear it in the first place. And you touched upon the answer a little bit, which is the education system, right? High school, middle school. But all of those environments where we learn how to speak, Pete, have three main challenges. The
Mm.
first one is all of them are mandatory. Where you don't wake up in the morning and say, "Hey, Pete, you want to get breakfast and present all day?" Nobody says that. That's one.
Yeah,
The second challenge is that the presentations are never tied to your passions. It's never, "Hey, what are you passionate about, Pete?" Media,
yeah,
technology,
yeah,
podcasting.
yeah,
Yeah, you got to talk about Shakespeare and poetry, and you got to get over it. And then the third piece is every presentation is tied to a bloody punishment. So every time you don't do a good job, you lose grades. So yeah, it makes sense. We grow up believing that communication is a chore, so it becomes what no
yeah.
one wants to get better at doing the dishes.
Man, there's so much in this. There's so much in this. The If you're gonna look, people always want to put high school teachers on the spot. Like, I didn't learn this in high school. Well, is that your fault or is that their fault? Um, if you're going to teach a high school kid public speaking, part of it is to extract that passion out of them. Like when you have write a 500-word composition on what you did this summer. Like it's super easy. But if you're a kid, it can be crippling. So part of that teaching process is to slow down and say, well, what did you do? Talk to me about it. And just face to face, talk to each kid, or have, hey, parents, talk to your kids, help them do an outline or whatever it's going to be. And it's the same thing with public speaking. And the kids are going to have an outside ego, outside and so they're not going to be able to do adult level speaking most of the time. But there's so much in that preparation in your three elements. There's just like in those, there are three sub elements, and there are probably several that have sub elements, three sub elements off of that sub element. And it's a really interesting way to approach looking at something as simple as getting up in a junior year class and presenting your talk on Moby Dick.
I'm with you, Pete. There, right? It's all about the energy. Let's think about sports. So why do guys generally like growing up enjoying sports? It's because the memories that they have as a child around sports is fairly positive.
Mm,
So let's say we take basketball, right?
yeah,
So when you think of basketball, you think about the games that you'd watch with your dad, or football. You think about the games you'd watch with your dad. You think about shooting hoops with your friends. But what if I threw a basketball in somebody's face every time they missed a shot for their whole childhood? They'd grow up hating basketball. But that's what
yeah.
we're doing with our children with communication. Every time they miss, we throw a basketball in their face. So they just grow up having negative, terrible memories around
Mm.
communication. And they just believe the fear that is associated to it instead of realizing that the fear wasn't their fault in the first place.
If you're in high school and you feel like you have a lack of self confidence, or you're just worried about the perceptions, because high school, middle school, and high school kids, especially if you have damage from other crappy middle school kids, because no kid gets through middle school without that. There is a lot of legitimate fear because all you've known publicly is that you'll be harassed by the very people you're standing in front of, or you've seen them harass somebody. You're like, they didn't harass me today. I don't want to give them a reason to. And so the smallest error is so consuming, you don't have time to. And I'm going to create a gap here later on now. Like when I talk, when I'm here talking to you in the podcast, my brain is clocking several things. Like Brad just put a comment up. I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm listening for the things I want to bring up. I'm considering a certain point and what element of that point I want. I'm doing a lot. I'm doing a lot of stuff. What I'm not worried about is if Jenny with that yellow sweater is going to call me, boogerhead Pete or something like that later on, because it just doesn't matter, right? And so there's to get from where you are when you're terrified, and legitimately terrified, because it's terrifying to be in high school and stand on stage in front of a bunch of people and be judged, whether you're going to be judged or not, to get to the point where you have the ability to slow your brain down and program your brain to look at all these different things. Because right now I'm clocking, what does the show need? What does Brenden need? What does Pete need? right? All these things, and I'm feeding each one of these things as we're talking.
Absolutely, Pete. And the answer to that gap is something I teach called the easy threes, but I'll give you the first one to keep it simple. But the context is communication, to your point, Pete, is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, right?
Right,
One of those balls is smiling, one of them's eye contact, one of them's body language, one of them's storytelling. And it gets really confusing for most of us. That's why we don't improve.
right.
So for me, the question has simply been, what are the three easiest balls to juggle? Because if we can
Yeah.
juggle those, it's a lot easier for us to get the result. So let's start with ball number one, which is the random word exercise. Pick a word like phone, like plug, like pistachio, like home, and create random presentations out of thin air. And the reason this is so effective, Steve, I'm gonna call you Steve, Pete, is for two reasons. One is because it helps you, if you can make sense out of nonsense, you could make sense out of anything. And then
Hmm.
the second piece, it just helps you deal with uncertainty. Like when you go to an event, a party, and you meet somebody, you don't know how that conversation is going to go. So if you can talk about avocados for 30 seconds, you could talk about
Yeah.
anything for 30 seconds.
Yeah. That ability. I was a spy when I was in the army, so I've had thousands of conversations in really crazy places. I've also had over 1,000 shows on this show, and so you eventually develop a well of stories and references and wisdom bits and all of these things. But that comes from the act of simply doing it, right? Like you have to go out the door, go off the camp, and go meet somebody and have these conversations, write down notes, process them, turn them into a report, think about them, and they just all fill your head. I can talk about a lot of crap, right? But I'm 53 years old. There's a lot of stuff in there. So how do you show someone the vessel that their head is and start helping them figure out how to fill it with good things?
Absolutely. And for me, it's all about a game of momentum, right? So let's say
Okay.
we take the random word exercise as an example, and we're using the frame of high schoolers, but honestly, the frame is anybody, right? In the sense of saying, hey, instead of making this a chore, let's make this
Hmm.
fun. So when we're at dinner with our family, have them give you a random word. You do it, you give them a random word. When you're picking them to and from school, if you got kids, for those of you listening to this who have children, do this to and from school. Just give them a random word, have them give you a word, and make it an integrative part of your
Hmm.
daily routine. And then what happens is as that momentum builds, the most important transformation, Pete, is the changing of energy. So now, whenever we think communication, we think of it less as a chore, as a negative, as something bad to, oh, I get to play this fun game called the random word exercise, and I'm getting better at it. So then, when
Right.
we learn a skill, we build momentum. But then we get excited about going, oh, I'm really good at this now. Now what's the next ball? Which is like sending video messages to people that you love. It's answering a question every day. I call it the question drill. You make a list of a bunch of questions you think the world will ask you, and you just answer each one until you have an
Hmm.
answer for everything. And that just helps you build momentum really quickly because all of these exercises, people don't have to think too much about it. They just have to book 15 minutes in their calendar every day to just do them.
Yeah. A daily exercise to work on building a skill. And you talk about this in some of your videos. I think it's the video that leads your channel. Like just work on the thing that leads you to where you are so you become this person that you want to be. Just a daily thing, like take a word like pistachio and do a 30-second blurb on it. And that learning out loud, you can publish that. You could publish that. Like, hey, this guy takes a word and writes on 30 seconds on it. Wow, it's incredible. It's a fascinating thing. Maybe New York Times picks it up and all of a sudden you've been discovered by something that matters. It's like,
You're like the next Justin Bieber.
yeah, but I mean, literally, that is what happens, right? Justin Bieber goes to a talent show and the right guy sees him and he's like, there's money. He's standing right on that stage right there. And I know how to get it. And that's a lot of it is by just simply doing it. You may or may not get discovered, but you're always getting better at what you do.
Well said. Well said, Pete, right? It's all about saying, are we having a bias for action or information? The best way to speak, Pete, I know this is going to sound shocking, but it's really to speak. The reason you're a great interviewer is because you've done like thousands of them, right?
Right.
It's not because I'm sure episode one isn't as clean as this one, right? Or the next
Right.
one.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing with me. When I started my YouTube channel, I'm just a kid in my mom's basement going, hi, everyone, welcome to Master Talk. And that's it. That was literally my first video. It's up there. People can check that out if they want to be horrified by something.
Yeah.
but that's really the key. It's the momentum building. So for
Mm,
example, everybody who's listening to this and thinking, well, I'm too busy, I don't have time to do the random word exercise. Well, my only response to that, Pete, is everyone who's listening, do you shower every day? And I hope so. I hope you do. Well, you got 15 minutes in there. What are you doing in the shower? Right?
yeah.
So just use that time to just do the random word exercise. That's it.
I love it. Yeah, just find that time, right? Whatever it is. It can be, I write stories when I go to sleep. I don't stay awake for very long. I'll start with a premise, a character, and I'll just think about a story. And all of a sudden I'll realize I guess you would call it like that lucid dreaming phase where I'm falling asleep and I'm not conscious, but I'm also not asleep. And the story will start to spin out of control. And then I'll realize I'm falling asleep and then I just go to sleep. And I never finish the story ever, and
Mm.
so it's just this exercise of doing that. But even in that moment, there are things that I keep when I come up with something. Like I'll put two impossible things. I'll start with an emotion or whatever it is. How do you get out of this story box? And before I actually ever get out of the box, I'm asleep, but there's elements of improvement in that exercise.
Absolutely. Right. It's exactly what you're touching on, Pete, which is the elements of improvement. So when we start to get better, we feel that confidence and we go, "Oh, I'm a lot better than this than I thought." And that
Mm,
helps us dream. That's why I was like going back to this question, right? How would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? You don't need to be a big speaker on a stage. Because for me, communication is so much more than that. It's the way
right.
that we raise our children. It's the way that we talk to our
Man.
family. It's the way that we make new friends. It's the way that we order food at a restaurant and make the waiter smile for once in his shift because he's really busy and he's tired and he's got a bunch of shitty customers that day. Right?
Yeah.
It's the way that we lead a more a quality
Yeah.
life. So yeah, that's really the key.
Oh man, and that's such I'm enjoying that because it's something I try to do. And look, it's easy to have people in your life be invisible to you. It is that waiter, it's that cashier, whoever it is. I try to make someone's day every day, right? This is one of the ways I communicate, and I try to be the good person that I am. Like, can I give someone a compliment, or can I just say, "Hey, I see you working hard." Like, I love to talk to the person as you walk out of the airport, that last security guard that makes sure no one walks by them, into the outdoor. You get what I'm saying? And I'll turn around and I'll look at that person. And I'll say, "Hey, I appreciate you sitting here. I know that nobody talks to you all day long. I see you, and I really appreciate walk on, because they are completely in, like literally their back is to you, and you never see them ever again because you're not supposed to walk towards them, and so no one ever does. So they just sit there and just like, and they do their job invisibly. And I like to break those bubbles when I see them.
That's powerful, man. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Why do we want to do that? It's life is way easier if you don't do that shit. Like there's things that I don't do because I am lazy and I'm like, oh, and I get myself off the couch and I go do it. But I want to do that. Why is that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's so powerful the story you told around the person who feels invisible. I think to keep it simple for people, just start with the people you already love where you have the highest level of motivation. This is the same thing around, which is the opposite topic, conflict resolution. A lot of people ask me, Pete, like, how do you resolve conflict with people you hate? I go, whoa, 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 take a step back. Why don't
Yeah.
we start with the people we actually care about? Because if we don't value
Yeah.
the relationship, we're not actually going to even want to get better at vocal tones, get better at active listening, get better at doing that. So it's the same thing with acknowledgement. Start by acknowledging the people who pour into you. So one strategy I
Uh,
teach is just make a list because I don't expect everyone to be an expert like you. Even I'm intimidated to talk to the guy who's like, well, he might like arrest me or something. So I'm kind of scared of talking
boy.
to that guy. So even for me, so where I start is by going, just make a list of the top 5 people that you really care about the most in your life. Right? So
Mm,
Billy's one of those people. I know we talked about that before the show started, right? He's like one of my best friends. So he's one of those people, right? Family members, clients, just people that really invest in you. And then what you want to do is you want to send those people privately. You don't have to post it on social media, anything. Just a 20-second video message. Say, hey, Pete, I'm thinking about you. Thanks for all the work that you're
yeah.
doing. I love what you're doing at the podcast. Hope you're having a fantastic week. And I'm super grateful to have you in my life. It takes 20 seconds and it makes people's days. And then I do something even crazier than that, Pete, that I think you'll find funny. I actually did this morning is my top 100 clients, supporters, people who really help me with my brand. I have their birthdays in my Google Calendar. So when it's their birthday, which one of them was today, I put a stupid birthday hat on that I bought for $10 at Amazon. and I open my camera and I go, guess whose birthday it is? And then I go, it's
That's great.
yours. That's
Yeah.
it. Doesn't
Yeah.
cost a dime.
You know, doing that, even for someone who's hyper famous that you have, look, there's a lot of famous people on my phone, right? Because I've met a lot of them over the years. When you take time to do that, because famous people are also invisible, and you're just like, hey, man, I saw you came out with a great album. I hope you're doing well, and let's chat soon. Even if you're never going to chat with them, right? Man, so many times I'll get a text back, hey, Pete, thanks for doing it. And I'm talking household name famous, right? And like, yeah, thanks for doing that. I was having a bit of a rough day and you picked me up. I appreciate you checking in, right? And they're not saying let's go have coffee and all that stuff, but they're taking the time. And I'm not saying any names, right? Because I'm not trying to expose anything, but I'll say a name, a comparable name, someone like Matt Damon, right? And if I text that person and I say, and I don't do it every day, that kind of thing, but if I take that moment, man, oh man, it makes a difference. And I try to do that with anyone. Anytime anyone pops into my head. So my brother died about a year and a half ago, and I'm like,
Wow.
okay, I'm going to create a better version of me who appreciates the people around them and tells them, hey, I hope you're having a great day, or you really make me smile, or you popped into my head, because people enjoy finding out that hey, you're on my mind. They just love it.
Powerful, man. And thanks for using the example of your brother. Even more powerful. And creates that urgency, right, for all of us
Yeah,
to
yeah.
really pour more into the people around us.
I'm 53, and right now in my circle, in my secondary circle, maybe a little bit in my tertiary circle, there are people dying every 2 months.
Jeez.
And you're like, wow, I won in terms of what we do. I got to get better at counseling my friends and standing in front of them and talking about death, advising them on how to deal with this path because I got a lot of stuff in my head, and they're lost. And there's rules to death, like everybody's bad at it. Everybody's bad at people dying. It breaks families up. So, there's work to be done while you're alive and get to doing it now and get over your fear of reading. This is a fantastic book. Everybody, I'm talking to everybody right now. Read Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. He's a fantastic writer. He's a doctor, and he talks about all of it. And you will benefit from it. Don't be scared of these things because it's coming no matter what. Here's how you get better. So anyhow,
Mm.
um, when you look at all of these things that come with people dying, one of them is quit talking about how great somebody is when they're dead and they can't hear it. Go take them out to lunch and be like, hey man, or hey lady, or hey girl, whoever it's going to be, and I think you're awesome. You do so many great things, and take time to do that. And that is a wonderful way to communicate joy and love and caring. And we don't collect nearly enough of that because what we want to collect day in, day out is like, I suck, I'm poor, I'm miserable, a back hurt. So forcing some goodness into someone's life is truly, it's a gem.
Well said, man. Well said. And the world needs more of it too. And it in the context of communication too, Pete, it teaches us a valuable lesson, which
Mm,
is you think when you send that video message, as an example, that people are going to reply with, why'd you send me a video message? Oh, you made so many mistakes. Oh, why are you got so many ums and ahs? But the truth is, the response is always, not almost always,
yeah.
it's always, wow, I never received a video message before. This really means a lot to me. Thanks.
Yeah, you're inspiring me to do more of that. I try to write thank you notes, and here's the thing. I don't do it. I have all this great, I bought not a lot, but I bought stationery for myself with my name and everything on it. And I'm like, I'm gonna write letters of appreciation to people, whether they come on the show or they let me crash at their place, whatever it is, right? I'm gonna do that. I don't do it, but I can certainly, and it's old timey and it's fun, and you're in your sepia colored mind. You're like, yeah, I'll write these things, and they'll keep them, and maybe someday just send a damn video. It's doesn't have to be great, doesn't have to be well produced. It just has to be created, produced in general, and sent. I love that.
Exactly. That's why I don't do the handwritten letters either, because I just don't do it. But the
Yeah,
videos are simple because now it's just like you open it, it's 20 seconds, it's done,
yeah,
and it really empowers people. Because the problem with the handwritten note is it does mean something to people, but then they lose the note. Whereas the
yeah,
video, they'll think back 2 weeks later and they'll go, "Didn't Brendan send me a video?" And they'll just replay it for their own kind of
yeah.
leisure. So
It is a really, it's a powerful thing. And the thing is, like when I gotta get a Christmas card, what do I do with it now? Like I throw them out, because I don't collect things, and so maybe I'll keep one or two a year, maybe. But most of them are perform. Look, I love getting Christmas cards, but a lot of times you get something that's just like, hey, we sent you this thing, we were thinking of you, and it's like, okay, good. There's a transaction there, and then I throw it in the trash because I don't want to keep it. And that's where these letters often will end up, right? And so a video, you're like, no, you know what? Pete, it turns out Pete sent me 20 videos over the last 5 years, or something like that, and you can watch it, and it really can become something because look, letters are magical. I don't write them, and so I'm not very good at writing them. But a video, I can for sure do. I'm definitely going to be doing more of that, man.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, okay, as someone who communicates for a living, I when I see malcommunication, it just rankles me, especially like when it's a company that should know better. And look, I'm all for using bots as your entryway into your company, but there are so many times where I'm like, if you just like when you send me an email to a do not respond from a do not respond email robot, well then you haven't communicated. You've just blasted me with something, and it's I'm like, all right, you don't care about me. I sent an email off to Southwest. I got caught up in some of that travel trouble the last 6 weeks or so,
Yeah, yeah.
and I have not received a letter from anyone. I did receive a robot letter saying, hey, why don't you try calling in? But I don't care how big your company is, if you can't respond professionally when someone takes the time to write you an email and say, hey, I understand it's hard to run an airline, but I got caught up in your guys' mistake. I got caught up in the FAA's mistake. And so that hangs on you. If you want to just send me back something automated that says, hey, maybe try again, guess what? I'm not going to do. I'm not going to do your damn customer service for you. And how expensive is that for, in this case, Southwest Airlines?
Oh, absolutely, right? Bad word of the mouth spreads way faster than good word of mouth. And
Yeah.
that's really the
Yeah.
key. It's all about how are we creating those seven-star experiences whenever we can, right? It's all about how do
Hmm.
we create like what that's why I like the video message because it's meaningful, but it's also scalable because it
Yeah.
takes only
Yeah.
20 seconds to send one and it's easy. So it's all about finding that balance, right? And definitely bigger
Yeah.
companies can do a way better job with that, absolutely.
And it's they're trying to be lean. They're not trying to have a whole bunch of surplus people. I would say that someone that specializes in customer communication can pick up a lot of money off the ground and give it right back to the company and easily cover their salary. Let me give you an example. If you're a company, I'm a veteran. If you're a company that says we want to hire veterans, and I say, hey, this is a job I think I'm qualified for right there. And if I send in an email and I get basic like boop, message received, message, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, they aren't that jazzed about, email. You could have a robot that says, anytime I see veteran stuff in a resume, I'm going to respond back and say, I believe you're a veteran. If you are, click one of these times. We'll set an appointment up and we'll do a phone conversation to start you into the process. We'll see if something happens. Now the veteran's like, well, damn, I'll take 10 a.m. tomorrow. Holy shit, they're talking to me. They actually do care about me, even though I haven't talked to a person yet. And then a person does come on the phone at 10 a.m. on Tuesday or whatever it is. And then you say, oh, you're a veteran. I'm a veteran too, because that person should be a veteran. Like, yeah, you know what? This is a great company. Love to figure out what works for you. Why did you apply for this job? What else is out there? And now you're having a real conversation. If you care about, in this case, we're using veterans, if you care about people who do these things, you have to communicate with them. LinkedIn is full of people saying, I am trying to find a job. I'm applying. I'm reaching out to people. Brenden, I'll talk to the guys I'll connect with the guys from YouTube who are trying to help make me a better creator, who are supposed to be my business partner. And I can't get those guys to respond to a single message. And I'm not pitching them stuff. I'm just saying, hey, you're down the road in Santa Monica. I'd love to pick your brain. I'd love to get to know you. I'd love to take you out for coffee. I'd love to communicate what I'm going through so you guys can improve. Zero, nada, nothing. And you cannot, as a business, do that to people
Absolutely.
cheaply. Cheaply. You can do it expensively, but you know, I think about the value of that and how much money there is that you just waste by being a robot communication machine that never responds to someone who's like, you've got the affect part. They've reached out to you. Might be a bad affect, but you can flip that by just something that go, hey, I heard you, and let's see if we can figure something out.
Right on, Pete. For me, the game has always been if you communicate 20% better than your competition, you will stand out 100% of the time. So I
That's
think the
good.
main message here is you don't need to be like Jennifer Lopez here. All you
Hmm.
need to be is to be a little bit better than everyone else. and you'll
Yeah.
stand out a lot more. Like, I'll get a simple example. Let's say you go to a bakery. Okay, most bakeries, you just order. Wait, what do you want? What do you want? You want a croissant? Okay, cool. Yeah, have a great day. That's it.
Hmm.
Versus like a better bakery, just go, hey, what's your name? I'm Brian. What brings you to town? Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's great to get to know you. Hey, why don't you give me your email address? I'll send you a
Yeah.
discount coupon so you can get a free muffin the next time you come here. What do you think?
Yeah.
And then you capture their information, you build a relationship with them, and then you have data on that person. Those little things, it's so simple that
Uh,
nobody does it.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, newsletters are like the worst version of that, you know. And look, everybody does newsletters, and I'm not bashing it. It's an exercise, but compiling emails so you can send me your junk. Like, how many newsletters do you think I can read? You know, I'd rather you say, "Hey, let's have a chat. Let's do a virtual coffee or whatever it's going to be." Really do something. Like if you're in that bakery and the person's like, "Hey, I'll take a croissant." You know, you reach back across the counter and you say, I'm a real good baker. Have you ever had a cornetto? No, what's a cornetto? It's the Italian version of a croissant, and it's different, very similar, but I think in some cases better. And I want you to have that experience. Oh, oh man, Brendan, that is so huge to be able to say something like that to somebody and get them to go, wait, you saw me? I existed in front of you? Holy shit. I always say I'm a middle-aged man. I'm invisible, right? And it's so true. Like all of a sudden, if someone pops that bubble for me and I'm like, you can see me? I make that I make that joke every time. I was in Ohio with my girlfriend. We were staying the night at like a cute little beast, you know, a boutique bed and breakfast thing. And we were sitting in their little bar. And I mean, it is a little bar. It's got 6 people tops. And we were sitting there on one corner, and then there were 4 young people. And the guy looks at me and goes, and then asked me, you're all part of the conversation, even though we weren't talking, right? And he looks at me and he's like, what do you think about that? And I'm like, you can see me? And I literally said that. I'm like, I didn't realize you could say, because you can be invisible right in someone's life. And you're so right that popping that bubble and saying, hey, you've come into my place. I wanted to thank you for that. Can I make a recommendation for you? I hear you want, you know, and then do the cornetto versus croissant conversation or whatever it is. I love that, man. That's inspirational. And these are things we can do throughout the day.
Absolutely. Right. And that's how you build loyalty. Right. And this is what Seth Godin calls the smallest viable audience. Whenever you're building a business or a movement, it's not about getting millions of people to like you. It's about finding those 100,
Yeah.
those 1,000 people that really can't live without
Yeah.
you. Right.
Yeah.
And when you
Yeah.
have those people, you'll always be successful.
You know, I'm not the greatest businessman in the world, and I don't run the greatest show or anything, but I am very successful. And when you look at Podcast Mountain, I'm way the hell up there. You know, the show brings in revenue. Um, I'm not going away. Like I'm past the 10 show or the 50 show barriers, you know, by then some. But you're right. I've got people that are not in my immediate circle when I arrived to podcasting, but they're in my immediate circle now, and I've met them because of, and I met you because of podcasting, right? And so I have all these wonderful new people in my life. And so instead of having like a VIP day or Pete's going to be in town, pay me $100 to stand in front of you on a stage, I just try to spend time with them, you know, whenever I can. And I can't always do it, but I try to be available. And then I get them off the couch. Like, come on, come out and see me. Like every year I do a charity ride from California to Charlotte or somewhere in the South. And then, you know, come back. People get off their couch and come see me because I spend time right now talking to them. And so all of these things don't have to be monetized. They just have to be realized to be valuable.
Well said. Absolutely. Completely agree with you, Pete. It's all about how do you create those touch points
Yeah.
and relationships that nobody is creating. And then the other piece that you touched upon is the idea that consistency beats intensity. Because you've been doing it for so long, you're now getting to a place where you're established, right? And a lot
Yeah.
of us, we don't stick with the same thing for long enough to build that rapport, to build those touch points, and to build the
Yeah.
reputation that compounds over time.
I don't know what the number of shows is it takes to make it, you know, in a lot of ways I've made it. If you're just starting out and you look at my show, you're like, God damn, that is an incredible show, right? But I don't feel like I'm anywhere near making it, you know. So you're always working, and you think of the thousands of hours, the 10,000 easy of hours that I've taken to build this show, and I don't feel like I'm anywhere near the potential of what this show could be, right? And I'm always working on trying to find it. But think about the lessons I learned 8 years ago, 9 years ago that I had come back and I improved upon it. There's a pile of work. So to think that you're going to show up and do an eight-part series on whatever topic and get any real attention, it's folly. I want you to do it. I want you to go for that, but you have to set your expectation on. There's a lot of people out here playing hard, like competitors with us, because you have your own show. Jason Bateman has a podcast. How do you compete with that? That guy sucks up a lot of attention because he's such a charming dude. Oh, and he's brought his actor friends with him too, and they're all charming. And so like you think, man, I'm not in competition with those guys. You're right, you're not, because you can't. Unless you find your people, you are not going to grab the mass people like they are, because they've been doing it. They are charming. They have all of these things going for them, and so you're playing in that space. And to think that you're going to out communicate someone who has that level of a platform, it's very difficult to do that. Which doesn't mean you can't succeed, but you can't take lightly what it takes to get somewhere.
Exactly. To build on that great point you made, Pete, it's all about finding what is that spot that you feel the world needs you. Like for me, anyone who doesn't want to learn about communication, like I'm not for them, right? It's really for people who are introverted, shy. Like get really clear about who is that person that you're trying to help. And it could be like a doctor who's in this specific practice and line of work. That person will resonate with you if you're like a medical doctor doing that specific thing. So
Yeah.
you need to just find it. Whereas I think a lot of content creators, the mistake they make, and it's okay to do this at the beginning to get the reps in, is they're too general. Like, who are you trying to serve? Like, what are you trying to actually achieve? And I feel
Sure.
the more specific the vision is, or the personality, the angle that we're taking on, the easier it is for us to not compare ourselves to the Jason Batemans of the world, as an example.
Yeah. When someone discovers my show and they're like, "Oh, you have a show? Oh, tell me about it." And I'm like, "Well, and I don't niche by design, because I didn't want to. That is my niche. I have not niched. Joe
Right.
Rogan doesn't niched. We don't do these things, which is fine." And someone will say, "Well, what's it about?" And I'm like, "Well, I talk to anybody, authors, actors, warriors, anybody, right?" And I can just take any three examples that pop into my head when I meet them. And then I'll say, I just, and like what's like the catchphrase, but like, I illustrate life. That's it. Life isn't simple. And I love when people are like, "I don't know what that means." And I'm like, "Well, that's why you watch the show, to experience things you might not have experienced, because I'm going to illustrate life for you. Whether you're talking about someone who runs a church, someone who runs an office, or someone who runs a microphone in front of 50,000 people, you're going to get experiences from these people."
Well said. Well said. I agree. And no niche could also be a niche, right? It's all about figuring
Right.
out what is that angle. And for you, it's because you've been doing it for so long and it's worked out for you. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Where are you headed, man? We started off this whole thing and you're like, "Hey, I'm only this far up the mountain," but you have done it. Like, you've got a lot of followers. People are paying attention to you. You are working and getting on my show and other shows. I normally say no to cold pitches from someone who is, I don't do quoted fingers, a coach, right? But there was something in what you did that made me say yes. So where are you headed? What are you doing?
Yeah, for sure, man. For me, the future, why I started all this, because I think the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach. That's really the mission. So how do I
Yeah.
make communication tools more accessible for people? And I think that the reality of Dale Carnegie's life, which I think is unfortunate, is Dale Carnegie, the author of the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. He was like a proficient public speaker, shared a lot of tips that probably I'm sharing today in a different way, but he didn't have the means of technology to immortalize them. Like he couldn't guest
Right.
on this podcast because podcasts weren't a thing in the 1900s.
Yeah.
He couldn't start a YouTube channel. He couldn't create content. And I'm really fortunate in my life, Pete, where I built up this expertise really early in the game, and now I get the opportunity to finish what Dale Carnegie started. So that's really the game that I'm playing in, and super excited about the future.
Yeah, well, you should be. I mean, you're past so much of the hard stuff, and though you're young, you've got a lot of it already covered, and now it's just a matter of continuing to do. That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, you've made it. Like, you are made it past the things that eliminate the wheat and the chaff, and now it turns out that you're actually going to be some really tasty wheat. Whether you become a wheat thin or a Cheerio or whatever it is that you become, it's going to be incredible.
I'll be a nice loaf of bread. He'll be great.
Yeah, a cornetto. That's what you'll be.
I gotta try this. Like, what? Even I
Yeah.
want to try your bakery. And I was like,
You
does
know,
does
you
Pete
know,
have
I
a
love
bakery?
this. in my home, adorable little hometown that I'm from and I'm in today, there is this family from Italy that moved here right in the beginning of the pandemic. And like, we're going to open a little bistro at this bed and breakfast because they had made some friends, who lived in our town and have a bed and breakfast. And so they have this wonderful little Italian cafe. And the lady is adorable, and her kids are in high school, and they're like these Italian handsome guys, and they're the sweetest people ever. And she's like, I'm like, oh, I'll take a croissant. She's like, oh, we call it a cornetto. It's a little different. And I'm like, oh my God, I want 5 of them just because you're talking to me about them in your adorable little accent. And she's so passionate about it. And so whenever I see anybody there in town, like, where should I eat? I'm like, you have to go to Amore. You have to go there because they're so great and they're so wonderful. And look, the food is fantastic, but that's not why I send people there. I send there because I know that, and a lot of people know me in my town. I know that when they go there, they're going to be treated like they exist. And I don't know if there's anything better than
Wow, now you got me hungry, man. Now the next time I'm in
that.
LA, I gotta get some
That's
amore
right.
with you and eat some
Yeah.
cornetto.
This is up north in the Bay Area, but yeah, whatever. We'll get
Oh, this is
together
more
up
in the
here.
Bay. Gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, yeah. Um, Look, you and I've been banging the ball back and forth, kind of, jiving on all that stuff. But what do you want to ask me? What else do you want to get into?
Yeah, I would say the question for you, Pete, is what's your vision for this? Because now you've been successful with the show. So where do you see this going over the next?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to grow either the show or look, the show generates revenue, but it is not a living, right? So there's money that comes in, but you have to be willing to go through a lot of financial hardship to do this kind of thing. And
Right.
so I think that there are opportunities to create content for bigger platforms where I don't have to earn the audience. I can go to someplace that has one and they're interested in getting quality content. So one of the things I'm creating is it's a series of conversations with religious leaders. Doesn't matter the faith or the religious bent or whatever, but just going there and talking to them about what they do because the churches suck at communicating in general, and the perceptions are out of scope with what they do. Yes, there are terrible things that religion has caused in the history of humanity. Join the crowd, because that's what humans do. But if you take time to talk to these incredible people that devote their life to guiding a flock of people, I submit we're going to find out wonderful things. And so I think there's value in creating some of these. That's a lot of times where I look, Brendan, is like where the story is driven by a narrative. Like when people say the words, and this is not meant to be political, this is just a conversation. When someone says big oil or big pharma, and they are mad, I'm like, well, what's in between pharma? What's small pharma? How does small pharma even work? Like, why are you putting the word big in front of there? That's my communication brain going, that's bullshit. And so how do we? I'm not saying that pharma companies are innocent of wrongdoing, but we had Monsanto on the show a long time ago, and we said to them, "You guys are terrible at communication. Like everybody else talks for you." And I've always sought to do this. So I'm always looking for ways to go. Like I went here in America, down in Texas, we have a problem along the border, and our vice president wouldn't go. And I'm like, well, I got a truck, I got a bag full of gear. I'm going. And I went down and I talked to the dude who's down there who holds the responsibility for the entire government to run this county. And so I think that there's value in that. I haven't found the money in that, but I do find some money. So there is something there. I'm shaking out my pan and I'm like, oh, there is something there. And sometimes it's just getting to know somebody who's incredible and that person looks out for you. Like the next time someone sends me a check for $1,000 to keep me going, not going to be the first time. Hopefully it won't be the last. But that's sort of where I'm going is I'm continuing to build and continuing to add elements to what I do, and hopefully someone's going to recognize that and say, hey, help us do the same thing or do that for us. I don't know what that answer is, but my life is too enriched by my show to stop.
Powerful.
Yeah,
Powerful. And that's why you've been consistent for so long with it. So there you go.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's plenty of times when I'm like, this doesn't make any financial sense. Why am I doing this? Why am I getting into my truck and driving 1,000 miles to the middle of nowhere? Oh, that's right. Because it's wonderful once you're finished doing it. And not everybody can do it. My friends who have to work are like, don't you dare stop. And I'm like, well, then don't you dare not open your wallet and buy a tank of gas or whatever it is. And there's a lot of times where someone who I know, they have a surplus of money, but they don't have a surplus of joy or
Mm,
experience. And I become kind of their guide or I become their proxy. Like I want to be on the road with you in Texas. I'm like, well, come on, you bring your credit card, we'll go. Like, I can't go. I got to work. And I'm like, well, still bring your credit card and help me be on the road. But look, Brent, I had to learn to do that though. I had to learn to say, this is where there's a value in exchange. How do we fix that? If it's $100 for you, do you care about $100? And so a lot of times I survive and get to do things because I ask, because I work lean. I mean, I'm not. I'll sleep in the back of my truck if that's what it takes to get things done.
Powerful, man.
Yeah,
Love that.
yeah, yeah. I love it too. What else is next for you, like in the immediate future? Like, are you stacking up gigs? Where's the sweet spot for you in terms of trying to find some financial stability?
Yeah, for me, what happened is at the beginning, to your point, I did the same thing. Master Talk was just a hobby, right? So I was just putting a lot of money to professionalize the channel, and how I was funding it is because I had a pretty good corporate job. My ex life was I was a technology consultant at IBM. So Master Talk really started as a hobby. I only found out later, probably like 9 months into Master Talk, after years of coaching, that I could actually charge people for it. So what
Right.
ended up happening was a lot of executives and CEOs hire me privately, and they pay me a lot of money to kind of help
Hmm.
them how to
Hmm.
communicate, because for them the ROI is they just get a promotion at work, right? So I thought,
Yeah.
oh, like if I just coached 50 or 75 people of these types of individuals every year, I'll do way better than what I did in corporate. And that's how I
Yeah.
ultimately exited corporate. So those 50 people kind of helped me pay for the other 50,000 that I get free
Yeah.
content for. And the model worked out pretty well for me. So grateful.
You know what's remarkable? I had a guy on the show the other day. He's a commander, was a sub commander, and you don't get to run a submarine unless you're really good at being in the Navy. They don't just give that job to anybody. And we were talking about how in corporate America, which is different than the military, like you can say, "Hey, I need to figure out how to get this thing done." Your boss is like, "I need to get this better," and then everybody raised their hand. I've got an idea. I got an idea. And then if Brendan is over there in the corner, young Brendan, and you're like, "I can fix that." Like, "Hey, I fixed." Oh, you don't want to hear from me? I'm just going to leave and do it myself. And you can literally do that. You're like, "You guys don't think this is valuable? I think it is." Like if you and I partnered, and I'm not pitching you, but if you and I were to partner and say, we're going to help corporations be better at receiving inbound messages and getting something back that doesn't go beep at the end of its conversation. Like, how many people can we engage? So like, let's give them a robot matrix to go to, but at some point, if they stay in our funnel, we're going to pick up a phone and we're going to call them and we're going to treat them like they exist. If you and I built that company, I guarantee you we could go out in the market and say Southwest Airlines or whatever company it's going to be.
Uh,
We can improve and definitely get you a 10x, 10x net, because what you guys are messing up is costing you $100 million a year. You know, if they would have gave me Southwest, like they'd say, "Hey, you know what? Couple vouchers for a free flight. Why don't you guys go somewhere on us? We're sorry about that. That's not how we roll." And they just take that short term hit. It's going to cost them way more than that, because I'm purposely going to not use Southwest now because they didn't treat my legitimate complaint seriously. I'm not wasn't as bad as some of those people that got stranded, but for $150 or $300, I would have said, you know what? You guys didn't try to do that. You did a good job. You did right by me. Or if they would have sent back an email, "Hey, man, there's a lot of people that had a worse situation this past holiday season. You don't fall into that area. We appreciate you flying. We want you to fly with us. But in this case, it doesn't do anything." But instead, they sent me something from a robot that said beep at the end and gave me a phone number to call. So guess what? I'm not doing, right? And so I think we could fix that as a company.
I love that, man. I love that
Yeah.
idea.
I want to ask you something else. And I say this because it's a little
By the
bit
way, P,
challenging,
I
but
got to drop in 2 minutes. Just letting you
oh, okay, okay, we'll go real fast. And I'm going to handle this as delicately as I can in 2 minutes.
know.
Okay, so like, I have a bad back, right? When I talk publicly, I have to move around. And sometimes I'll say, "Hey, my back is all wrecked." And so I have to keep moving it and everything. You have seem to have something with your arm or whatever where you deal with this thing. That might limit a lot of people. Like, I can't stand in front of a crowd for 8 hours, right? Well, I can, but I got to keep moving around. How do you teach people how to deal with whatever their physical limitation is so that they don't have to worry about being on stage? Because Stephen Hawking had every physical limitation and he spoke in front of people all the time.
Absolutely, man. And you're right. Like I got a crooked left arm in my left side, and it's still crooked. And the reason is because I was born upside down when I got pulled out of a vacuum. My left side kind of dislocated a lot. So what I would say is it's definitely gonna burden you at the beginning, right? Because people will always look at your arm, they won't look at your eyes or the parts of your body. But I think what happens is over time, you get more confident, you change the story. So for me, it used to be,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh my god, my arm is crooked, no one's going to hear me talk. Whereas now the story is, wait a second, I have a crooked arm and I'm coaching other people how to speak. What's your excuse?
Yeah, right. I
Right.
love
So
it.
it's all about changing that story. So I would encourage everyone listening to change theirs into one that creates momentum and impact and positive for the people
I
around
love
them.
it. Well, let's get you out of here, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm going to roll these credits. You go on to your next thing with your heart out. We'll take care of everything else. Everybody go check out Brenden. You've got all the links that you need in the show notes, and or just look him up on YouTube. He's out there. Hey, Brenden, thank you so much for coming on, man. Have a great day.
Pleasure, man. Thanks for having me, P.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.